Carmilla, Chapter 8. Search. At sight of the room, perfectly undisturbed, except for our violent entrance, we began to cool a little, and soon recovered our senses sufficiently to dismiss the men. It had struck Mademoiselle that possibly Carmilla had been awakened by the uproar at her door, and in her first panic had jumped from her bed, and hid herself in a press or behind a curtain, from which she could not, of course, emerge until the major domo and his myrmidons had withdrawn. We now recommenced our search, and began to call her name again. It was all to no purpose. Our perplexity and agitation increased. We examined the windows, but they were secured. I implored of Carmilla, if she had concealed herself, to play this cruel trick no longer, to come out and to end our anxieties. And it was all useless. I was by this time convinced that she was not in the room, nor in the dressing room, the door of which was still locked on this side. She could not have passed it, and I was utterly puzzled. Had Carmilla discovered one of those secret passageways which the old housekeeper said were known to exist in the Schloss, although the tradition of their exact situation had been lost? A little time would, no doubt, explain all, utterly perplexed as, for the present, we were. It was past 4 o'clock, and I preferred passing the remaining hours of darkness in Madame's room. Daylight brought no solution of the difficulty. The whole household, with my father at its head, was in a state of agitation next morning. Every part of the chateau was searched. The grounds were explored. No trace of the missing lady could be discovered. The stream was about to be dragged. My father was in distraction. What a tale to have to tell the poor girl's mother on her return. I too was almost beside myself, though my grief was quite of a different kind. The morning was passed in alarm and excitement. It was now 1 o'clock, and still no tidings. I ran up to Carmilla's room, and found her standing at her dressing table. I was astounded, and I could not believe my eyes. She beckoned me to her with her pretty finger in silence. Her face expressed extreme fear. I ran to her in an ecstasy of joy. I kissed and embraced her again and again. I ran to the bell and rang it vehemently to bring others to the spot who might at once relieve my father's anxiety. "Dear Carmilla, what has become of you all this time? We have been in agonies of anxiety about you," I exclaimed. "Where have you been? How did you come back?" "Last night has been a night of wonders," she said. "For mercy's sake, explain all you can." "It was past 2 last night," she said, "when I went to sleep as usual in my bed, with my doors locked, that of the dressing-room, and that opening upon the galley. My sleep was interrupted, and so far as I know, quite dreamless. But I woke just now on the sofa in the dressing-room there, and I found the door between the rooms open, and the other door forced. How could all this have happened without my being wakened? It must have been accompanied with great deal of noise, and I am particularly easily wakened. And how could I have been carried out of my bed without my sleep having been interrupted, I whom the slightest stir startles?" By this time Madame, Mademoiselle, my father, and a number of the servants were in the room. Carmilla was, of course, overwhelmed with her inquiries, congratulations, and her welcomes home. She had but one story to tell, and seemed the least able of all the party to suggest any way of accounting for what had happened. My father took a turn up and down the room, thinking. I saw Carmilla's eyes follow him for a moment with a sly, dark glance. When my father had sent the servants away, Mademoiselle had been gone in search of a little bottle of Valerian and Solvatile, and there being no one now in the room with Carmilla except my father, the Madame, and myself. He came to her thoughtfully, took her hand very kindly, led her to the sofa, and sat down beside her. "Will you forgive me, my dear, if I risk a conjecture and ask a question?" "Who can have a better right?" she said. "Ask what you please, and I will tell you everything. But my story is simply one of bewilderment and darkness. I know absolutely nothing. But put any question you please, but you know, of course, the limitations Mamma has placed me under. Perfectly, my dear. I need not approach the topics on which she desires our silence. Now, the marvel of last night consists in you having been removed from your bed in your room, without being wakened, and this removal having occurred apparently while the windows were still secured, and the two doors locked upon its side. I will tell you my theory, and then ask upon you a question. Carmilla was leaning on her hand, dejectedly, Madame and I listening quite breathlessly. Now my question is this. Have you ever been suspected of walking in your sleep? Never, since I was very young indeed. But did you walk in your sleep when you were young? Yes, I know I did. I have been told so often by my old nurse. My father smiled and nodded. Well, what has happened is this. You got up in your sleep, unlocked the door, not leaving the key as usual in the lock, but taking it out and locking it on the outside. You again took the key out and carried it away with you to some one of the 25 rooms on this floor, or perhaps even upstairs or downstairs. There are many rooms and many closets, so much heavy furniture, and such accumulations of lumber that it would require a week to search this old house thoroughly. Do you see now what I mean? I do, but not at all, she answered. And how, Papa, do you account for finding yourself on the sofa in the dressing-room, which we had searched so carefully? She had come there after you had searched it, still in a sleep, and at last awoke spontaneously, and was as much surprised to find herself where she was as anyone else. I wish all mysteries were so easily and innocently explained as yours, Carmilla, he said, laughing, and so we may congratulate ourselves on the certainty that the most natural explanation of the occurrence is one that involves no drugging, no tampering with locks, no burglar or poisoners, or witches, nothing that need alarm Carmilla, or anyone else, for our safety. Carmilla looked charmingly. Nothing could be more beautiful than her tints. Her beauty was, I think, enhanced by that graceful languor that was peculiar to her. I think my father was silently contrasting her looks with mine, for he said, I wish my poor Laura was looking more like herself, and he sighed. So our alarms were happily ended, and Carmilla restored to her friends.